They pulled up my private road in a white SUV with a magnet that said Community Enforcement and a folder thick with photocopies, and the first 3 pages told me my cabin had never been mine. I remember standing on the porch drinking coffee, watching them sort through maps like they were choosing furniture, feeling something in my chest go flat like a big, quiet room going dark. That's the moment this whole thing stopped being just paperwork and started being personal. My name is Eli Mercer. I moved to Hollow Pine 5 years after I got out small solar setup, a garden, a dog named Buck, and the kind of quiet that lets you think straight. I like the way mornings sound there. Wind through the pines, the kettle clicking off, the kind of peace you don't realize you miss until it's gone. I wasn't looking for trouble. Trouble walked straight up my driveway wearing a blazer and a smile. Linda Crow was the HOA president, glossy hair, voice like smooth gravel, the kind of person who treats bylaws like gospel and neighbors like punctuation. She handed me the packet and said, "You'll want to look this over." She stood close enough to smell the perfume and not close enough to meet my eyes. Inside was a map with a new overlay and annexation line drawn defiantly over my property, an official-looking stamp, and a demand: vacate or face enforcement. They used words like encroachment and retroactive dues. I read them out loud just to hear the shape of it, as if saying it would make it make sense. It didn't. I did the only things I knew to do. I photographed everything. I pulled the deed out from the box in the closet and laid it on the kitchen table like a talisman. I called Jean. She's sharp, calm, and good at the things that make paper sing the truth. Title searches, county records, subpoenas. Jean said 3 words into the phone that settled me. Document everything. Always. The first week was what I call the small war, a chessboard of petty moves. They put up orange stakes on the road, survey markers. Someone left a crate on the edge of my property labeled temporary security, like it was a piece of furniture to be rearranged. Cameras appeared on poles where squirrels used to be the only ones watching me. I'd walk out and catch the HOA's crew looking at my solar array like it was a trophy. I tried to talk to them. "This is private property," I'd say, and they'd quote pages I'd never seen before. Then the nights started humming. One evening I heard it, a high, distant whine that made Buck stop mid-growl. A drone, thin as a mosquito, sweeping the yard. It crossed the moon and disappeared behind the tree line. A few nights later it came back, lower, brazen. I grabbed the old slingshot I keep for raccoons, and, I won't lie, I aimed at that hum. It fell like a meteor in the blackberry bushes and lay there, its propellers bent like wings that had tried too hard. Inside it was a tiny camera and an SD card. When I put that card in my laptop and watched, my stomach slid. There I was on the screen, recorded at dawn and dusk, my gate, my panels, the exact angle of my porch light. They'd been scouting my place not for safety, but for positioning. Footage showed men sketching, marking, whispering with clipboards. One clip clear as daylight showed Linda and another board member walking the perimeter, glancing at the old stone markers on my property and then at a paper map, smirking. The drone footage didn't just creep me out. It made the thing possible to prove. Jean dug. She pulled historic GIS maps, county plats, microfilm of survey notes, things people forget exist until you need them. She found an old GIS supervisor's annotations that matched my deed line to the inch. She also found something else. A version of the HOA's map with handwriting over the original, a line traced in a different ink, an overlay that had evidently been updated after Linda took office. The update had no county filing stamp, no recorded minutes, nothing official. It was clever if you squinted at it and wanted to be fooled. It was forgery if you looked at it straight. When we subpoenaed the HOA records, the tempers turned hot. Linda's smile thinned into something sharp. She started showing up at community meetings with a battalion of friends and a stack of revised documents, her voice turning conciliatory and then cold. At one meeting she said, "We're simply enforcing boundaries that protect property values." In the parking lot afterward, she told a neighbor, loud enough for others to hear, "Some people think rules don't apply to them. We'll fix that." She meant me. Things escalated in small, cruel ways. A support beam on the old tool shed was sawed from the inside out, not enough to topple it, just enough to send a message. My mail was rifled through. A threatening note slid under my door that said, "Leave before it gets ugly." I filed reports. The sheriff listened. He's a decent man, slow to anger, quicker to paperwork. He said, We can't do much until there's proof of a crime. Proof is what Jean and I were building. The courtroom felt thick with history oak benches, a smell of coffee and paper, murmurs that filled the breaks. Jean presented the deed, the county GIS supervisor's affidavit, the drone footage with location timecodes etched into each frame. She showed the annotated HOA map and laid the ink sample and the metadata on the table like a surgeon setting instruments. Then she called Gerald Moore, retired, creaky, and stubbornly honest, who testified that the HOA's so-called update was not in county records, that the handwriting matched a scanned note found on the HOA secretary's computer. When Gerald said the word forgery, it landed like a clap. Linda's lawyer tried to pin it on clerical error, on ambiguity, on a bad chain of custody. He asked me in court if I'd ever been aggressive. I've lived quietly, I said. I've never started a fight I didn't have to finish. They played a clip from the drone footage where I walked toward the men with an obvious hand signal to stay back, no aggression, just a man protecting his home. The judge watched the drone footage like everyone else, and when the clip of them redrawing the line played, you could feel the air change. The DA didn't move fast until the pattern was obvious. Once the forgery bracketed the dispute, the whole thing tilted from civil annoyance into criminal misconduct. Linda and 2 board members were indicted for fraud and tampering with public records. The county moved to invalidate the HOA's unauthorized annexation. The judge issued a temporary injunction. The stakes that had been hammered into my land returned to their dusty places. What people don't tell you about vindication is how ordinary it feels. There's no confetti, no triumphant music, just paperwork that says you were right, and a quiet house that sighs like a thing relieved. But there's also a bruise that stays. The nights were longer for a while. I'd wake and check the gate, wondering if someone would try to take advantage of the relief. Linda pleaded out, a sentence lighter than the headlines promised, and the HOA dissolved under the weight of audits and public anger. Some neighbors cheered, others shook their heads. The town had been divided and would take time to stitch back together. I learned things I didn't want to be an expert in. How to read a deed, what a meets and bounds description looks like, where county archives hide the truth. I learned what Jean had always known, that law is a kind of slow light. Sometimes it takes time to illuminate, but it reaches everywhere eventually. And I learned about people, how small power can corrupt, how bureaucracy can be wielded by the petty to make themselves feel large, and how quiet people, when pressed, can stand like a wall. There's a scene I keep replaying in my head. The morning after the injunction, the sun coming up over Hollow Pine like it always does, Buck on the porch steps, and me standing there with the deed in my hands. A neighbor, Ruth, came over and handed me a loaf of bread, simple, warm, and said, "Glad you're still here." She didn't make a speech. She smiled like someone who'd lived through winters and knew the value of a roof. That small gesture felt bigger than any headline. I don't want this to sound like a hero story. I'm not a hero. I'm a guy who loved a place and refused to let it be erased. The real characters are the small courtesies people offer when the law does its slow work. Jean's late calls, Gerald's stubbornness, the sheriff's patience, Ruth's bread. Those are the things that made the difference. So what do you do if something like this happens to you? You document. You get lawyers who know the land. You know your deed like it's the map to your child's first bike. You don't go looking for trouble, but you don't let trouble redecorate your life either. If you've ever had a run-in with a neighbor, an association, or a system that felt rigged, tell me, where did it go wrong? Was it greed, pride, misunderstanding, or something darker? I'll read as many as I can. I want to know how your town does justice, or fails at it, and whether we can do better by each other.